Oh, for what? Oh, come on. I was just having some fun. You know how rare it is I find something good like that to flaunt in her face?
Well, your timing sucks, bozo.
Think of your favorite sitcom like a comfort blanket. It is always there to make you feel better. But what happens when the people who wove that blanket are gone? It is a shock to the system. We have a list of 19 famous actors who brought us joy but met tragic ends. The details of the last story will truly break your heart. 1. Shelley Morrison on Will and Grace.
Sorry, what does Jack's father do?
Make people feel bad about who they are.
Everyone who loved the hit show Will and Grace remembers Rosario Salazar. She was the maid who did not take any nonsense from anyone. She worked for Karen Walker, the rich socialite with the high-pitched voice. The funny thing about Rosario is that she was only supposed to be in one single episode. The writers just needed someone for Karen to yell at for a quick joke. But Shelley Morrison was so funny and had such great chemistry with the cast that they kept her around for 8 whole seasons. She appeared in 68 episodes and became a fan favorite. Shelley Morrison had a long career before she ever put on that maid uniform. She had been acting for 50 years. She was in shows way back in the 60s, like The Flying Nun. She had a unique voice and a tough attitude that made her characters pop off the screen. Fans loved that she could go toe-to-toe with the main characters and often win the argument. But after the show ended its original run, Shelley decided to retire. When Will and Grace came back for a reboot years later, fans were hoping to see Rosario again. Sadly, Shelley chose not to return. She wanted to rest. Then, in December of 2019, the sad news broke. Shelley Morrison passed away at a medical center in Los Angeles. She was 83 years old. Her publicist said it was due to heart failure after a short illness. It was a quiet end for a woman who was so loud and full of life on screen. It is tough losing a TV legend who lived a long life, but it is even harder when we lose a star who was just starting to shine. The next actor on our list was young, talented, and on one of the hottest shows of the 90s, but his life was cut short in a way that left everyone confused. 2. David Strickland on Suddenly Susan.
Think of dancing as the most seductive form of foreplay.
Not helping. I'm always tense during foreplay.
If you watched NBC in the late 90s, you definitely watched Suddenly Susan. It was the big show starring Brooke Shields. One of the funniest people in the office was the character Todd Stitties. He was played by a guy named David Strickland. David was known for his boyish good looks and his frantic, high-energy comedy. He played the rock music reporter at the fictional magazine where they all worked. He was charming and seemed to have the world at his feet. In real life, David Strickland was fighting some very hard battles that he kept hidden from the cameras. He had struggled with mental health issues and substance challenges for a long time. People on the set loved him, but they knew he had some demons. In March of 1999, just days before the season finale of the show was supposed to air, tragedy struck. David Strickland went to Las Vegas. He checked into a motel room and ended his own journey. He was only 29 years old. The cast of Suddenly Susan was absolutely devastated. They were like a family. They had to figure out how to address his loss on the show. They ended up making a tribute episode where the character of Todd goes missing, and the cast tries to find him, only to learn he is gone. It was a heartbreaking moment where real life and fiction blurred together. David Strickland was a young man with so much potential. Losing him was a shock to the system for everyone in Hollywood. But child stardom can be even harder than adult fame. Our next actor was the biggest child star on the planet, but his adult years were filled with health struggles that eventually took him away. 3. Gary Coleman on Different Strokes.
Please don't go, Willis. I don't want to sleep alone. I'll have night nightmares. And what'll happen when I jump down from my bunk to go to the bathroom? Whose side am I gonna step on?
There was no catchphrase bigger in the 80s than "What you talkin' 'bout Willis?" That line belonged to Arnold Jackson, the cute kid with the chubby cheeks on Diff Rent Strokes. Arnold was played by Gary Coleman. He was a pop culture phenomenon. He was on lunchboxes, t-shirts, and cartoons. Everyone knew who Gary Coleman was. He played the role for 8 seasons and 184 episodes. But Gary Coleman had a tough life. He was born with a kidney condition that stopped him from growing tall. He remained 4 feet and 8 inches tall for his whole life. Because of his health, he had to have multiple surgeries and kidney transplants, even when he was just a kid. As he got older, finding work became hard. People only saw him as Little Arnold. He struggled with money and even had to work as a security guard for a while. Despite all the ups and downs, Gary kept trying to work in entertainment, but his body simply had too much to deal with. In May of 2010, Gary was at his home in Utah when he had a bad fall. He hit his head and suffered a brain hemorrhage. He was rushed to the hospital, but he slipped into a coma. He passed away a few days later at the age of 42. It was a tragic end for a guy who gave the world so many smiles. Gary Coleman was the face of his show. You could not miss him. But our next actor was famous for the exact opposite reason. He was on a huge hit show for years, but the audience never actually saw his full face until the very last episode. 4. Earl Hindman on Home Improvement.
Wilson, what are you up to?
I'm tending my tulips, Tim.
A little late in the year for that, isn't it?
Well, I'm forcing them.
How, by squeezing their bulbs?
Home Improvement was a massive hit in the 90s. It starred Tim Allen as the Tool Man. But the wisest character on the show was his neighbor Wilson. Wilson lived next door, and whenever Tim had a problem, he would go to the backyard fence to talk to him. The running joke was that the fence always covered the bottom half of Wilson's face. You could only see his eyes and his hat. He gave great advice and quoted philosophers, but he remained a mystery. The man behind the fence was an actor named Earl Hindman. Before Home Improvement, he was actually a tough guy actor who played villains in movies from the 70s. It was a funny twist that he became famous for, playing such a gentle, nice neighbor. Earl played Wilson for over 200 episodes. The cast said he was a true gentleman and very humble. He did not mind that his face was hidden. He enjoyed the joke. Earl was a heavy smoker for most of his life. Sadly, not long after the show ended, he fell ill. He was diagnosed with lung cancer. It was an aggressive battle. In December of 2003, Earl Hindman passed away in Connecticut. He was 61 years old. It was a sad day for TV fans. We felt like we lost our own wise neighbor. Wilson was a father figure to Tim Taylor. But our next actor played perhaps the greatest TV dad of all time. He was big, he was strict, but he had a heart of gold, and his passing left a giant hole in the sitcom world. 5. James Avery on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Excellent. I remember when I first got interested in poetry. So who's the girl?
When you think of TV dads, Uncle Phil is at the top of the list. Philip Banks on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was a powerful judge who took in his nephew Will. He was played by the incredible James Avery. James stood 6 feet and 5 inches tall. He had a booming voice and a commanding presence. He could be scary when he was mad, but he could also be incredibly soft and loving. The scenes where he hugged Will or gave him advice are some of the best moments in TV history. James Avery was a classically trained actor. He did Shakespeare and voice acting. In fact, he was the voice of the villain Shredder in the original Ninja Turtles cartoon. But Uncle Phil was the role that made him a legend. He was the dad everyone wished they had. After the show ended, James kept working constantly in movies and TV shows. In late 2013, James went to the hospital for open heart surgery. It was supposed to be a standard procedure to fix a problem. Sadly, complications happened after the surgery. On New Year's Eve, James Avery passed away at the age of 68. His TV son, Alfonso Ribeiro, who played Carlton, shared the news with the world. He said James was like a second father to him. The world mourned the loss of the best dad in Bel Air. Losing James Avery felt like losing a parent. But sometimes, tragedy strikes someone much younger, someone with their whole life ahead of them. The next story is one of the most heartbreaking on our list, involving a young mother and a terrible accident. 6. Naya Rivera on The Royal Family and Glee.
My mama done told me. Go, go. When I was in pigtails. Go, go.
Most people know Naya Rivera for her amazing singing and acting on the show Glee. She played Santana Lopez and became a superstar. But long before she was a cheerleader, she was a child actor in the sitcom world. When she was just a little girl, she starred in a sitcom called The Royal Family. It was created by Eddie Murphy and starred Red Fox. Naya played the granddaughter, Hillary. Even at 4 years old, she had huge talent and charisma. Naya grew up in the industry and worked hard to become a star. By 2020, she was a mother to a 4-year-old son named Josie. In July of that year, Naya took her son out for a boat ride on Lake Piru in California. It was supposed to be a fun summer day. They jumped into the water to swim. But the currents in that lake can be very strong and unpredictable. Something went wrong. The boat started to drift away. Naya managed to use the last of her strength to push her son back onto the boat to safety. But she did not have enough energy to save herself. She disappeared under the water. A massive search went on for days, and fans held out hope. Tragically, her body was found a few days later. She was only 33 years old. The authorities said she died saving her son. It was a heroic but devastating end to a bright light. Naya was a star who could do it all. Our next actor was someone you recognized instantly, even if you did not know her name. She was one of those faces that popped up in every funny show you watched, usually playing a quirky or grumpy character. 7. Mary Pat Gleason on Suddenly Susan and Mom.
Hi, I'm Mary and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Mary. Well, I have just had the worst week of my life. Sorry, one last thing.
You definitely know Mary Pat Gleason's face. She had over 174 credits on her resume. She was the kind of character actor who made every scene better. She was a writer as well as an actress. She won a Daytime Emmy for writing on the soap opera Guiding Light, but sitcom fans know her best from shows like Suddenly Susan, where she had a recurring role, and more recently on the hit show Mom. On Mom, she played a character named Mary, who was part of the AA group. She was hilarious, often interrupting with weird comments or grumpy observations. She also had a memorable guest spot on Friends as the grumpy receptionist at the hospital. She had a way of delivering a line that made it 10 times funnier than it looked on paper. Mary Pat Gleason fought a private battle for a long time. She had uterine cancer. She did not make a big public deal about it. She just kept working and making people laugh for as long as she could. In June of 2020, her friend posted the sad news that she had passed away. She was 70 years old. It was a reminder that behind the funny characters, these actors are real people fighting real wars. Mary Pat was a master of playing the employee or the side character. Our next actor made a career out of playing the boss. He was the clueless executive on the biggest sitcom of the 90s, and his interactions with George Costanza were legendary. 8. Richard Hurd on Seinfeld.
Are you feeling all right, George?
What?
You look a little warm.
It's a chicken.
You're a terrible liar, George. Look at you. You're a wreck. You're sweating bullets.
If you worked for the New York Yankees in the 90s, you might have had a boss like Mr. Wilhelm. On the show Seinfeld, George Costanza lands a job with the baseball team. His boss is Mr. Wilhelm, played by Richard Hurd. Mr. Wilhelm was confused, easily distracted, and often did things that made no sense. He was the perfect match for George. The scenes where he gives George a special project without telling him what it is are comedy gold. Richard Hurd was a serious actor before Seinfeld. He was in big movies like All the President's Men and The China Syndrome. He often played intense, scary authority figures. That is what made his role on Seinfeld so funny. He took that serious face and used it to play a totally goofy character. He also played another famous boss, Admiral Paris on Star Trek Voyager. Richard lived a long and successful life. He was also an artist who painted and made jewelry. In May of 2020, Richard passed away at his home in Los Angeles. He was 87 years old. His wife said the cause was complications from colon cancer. He left behind a legacy of great roles, but for comedy fans, he will always be the man who supervised George Costanza. Mr. Wilhelm was a boss who didn't know what was going on. Our next actor played a housekeeper who knew exactly what was going on. She was the sharp-tongued heart of a very popular sitcom, and her one-liners were legendary. 9. Conchata Ferrell on 2½.
So hug goodbye.
Seriously?
Come on, Alan. Despite everything, you and me have been like family.
Oh, I guess.
Men, Berta the housekeeper was only supposed to be a minor character on 2½ Men. But when Conchata Ferrell walked onto the set, she stole the show. Her character, Berta, worked for Charlie Sheen's character. She was gruff, sarcastic, and brutally honest. She did not take orders. She gave them. The audience loved her so much that she became a main cast member for all 12 seasons. She appeared in 212 episodes. Conchata was a powerhouse actress. She started on the stage and was a serious, dramatic performer before she found sitcom fame. She earned 2 Emmy nominations for playing Berta. She said in interviews that she loved the character because Berta was the only person in the house who knew who she was. Sadly, in 2020, Conchata's health took a bad turn. She suffered a severe kidney infection which spread and contaminated her blood. After that, she had a cardiac arrest. She spent months in the hospital trying to recover. But in October of 2020, she passed away at the age of 77. Her co-stars were heartbroken. Charlie Sheen called her an absolute sweetheart and a consummate pro. The house was just not the same without Berta. Conchata was a legend of modern sitcoms. But our next actor was a legend of the golden age of TV. He was a panelist, a storyteller, and a sitcom guest star whose career spanned 60 years, but his life ended in a shocking accident just crossing the street. 10. Orson Bean on Modern Family and Desperate Housewives.
You look a lot like my 5th husband.
Really? How many times have you been married?
4.
Orson Bean was a name that everyone knew in the 60s and 70s. He was a regular key on game shows like To Tell the Truth. He was funny, witty, and had a great twinkle in his eye. As he got older, he kept popping up in our favorite shows. He played the cranky neighbor Roy Bender on Desperate Housewives. He appeared on Modern Family, How I Met Your Mother, and Grace and Frankie. He never stopped working. Orson was known for his incredible storytelling. He could sit on a talk show couch and keep the audience captivated for 20 minutes. He was 91 years old, but he was still active and healthy. He was still doing theater in Los Angeles. On a Friday night in February 2020, Orson was walking across a street in Venice, California. He was going to meet his wife for a play. Tragically, he was clipped by a passing vehicle and fell. Then a second driver did not see him and struck him. It was a terrible accident. Orson Bean passed away right there at the scene. It was a violent end to a very gentle and funny man's life. The driver was distraught, and police said it was just a tragic accident. Orson Bean was the nice guy of TV. Our next actor is famous for being the bad boy. He created the archetype for the two-faced suck-up friend, and his character's name became a dictionary term for a troublemaker. 11. Ken Osmond on Leave It to Beaver.
Kidding! What do you think I brought these for? To trim my toenails? Well, who is it?
Hello, Mrs. Cleaver. You are looking lovely today. If you hear those words, you know exactly who is talking. It is Eddie Haskell from the classic show Leave It to Beaver. Eddie was played by Ken Osmond. He was the best friend of the older brother, Wally. To the parents, he was polite and sweet. But the second the parents left the room, he was a rascal who got the other kids into trouble. Ken Osmond played that role so well that people actually thought he was a bad kid in real life. But the truth was very different. After the show ended, Ken found it hard to get other acting jobs because he was so typecast as Eddie. So he made a huge career change. He joined the Los Angeles Police Department. He grew a mustache so people would not recognize him. He served as a cop for 18 years. He was even shot in the line of duty once and survived because his badge stopped the bullet. Ken eventually returned to acting later in life to reprise his role as Eddie in a revival of the show. He embraced his legacy. In May of 2020, Ken Osmond passed away at his home surrounded by his family. He was 76 years old. He had suffered from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. He went from being America's favorite troublemaker to a real-life hero. Ken Osmond was a classic sidekick. Our next actor was a standout in a police station sitcom. He was known for his deadpan face and his terrible coffee, and his death left a permanent gap in the cast. 12. Jack Sue on Barney Miller.
Barney, is your mother from Killarney?
Barney Miller was a huge hit in the 70s. It was set in a New York police precinct. The detectives were a mix of different personalities. One of the most popular was Detective Nick Yemina, played by Jack Sue. Nick was known for two things: making the worst coffee in the world and making dry, sarcastic jokes. Jack Sue had a way of delivering a line without moving a muscle in his face, and the audience would roar with laughter. Jack Sue had a fascinating life. He was actually born in Oakland, but during World War II, he and his family were sent to an internment camp just because of their Japanese heritage. It was a dark time, but Jack kept his spirit. He became a nightclub singer and comedian. He was discovered and eventually landed the role on Barney Miller. During the 5th season of the show, Jack started to get sick. He was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. It spread very quickly. Jack passed away in January of 1979 at the age of 61. He was the first main cast member of a hit show to die while the show was still on air. The cast broke the fourth wall and did a special tribute episode where they just sat around and shared memories of Jack. It was a touching farewell to a comedy pioneer. Jack Sue was the master of the deadpan stare. Our next actor was the master of the bug-eyed panic. He was arguably the best physical comedian of the 70s, and his legacy is colorful and chaotic. 13. Don Knotts on Three's Company.
I'm sorry, kids, but I just can't buy the idea that Leslie is a crook. There's a big reward.
When you think of nervous energy, you think of Don Knotts. He became a legend as Deputy Barney Fife on The Andy Griffith Show. But in the late 70s and 80s, he introduced himself to a new generation on the hit sitcom Three's Company. He played Mr. Furley, the landlord who wore crazy leisure suits and always misunderstood what the roommates were doing. Mr. Furley was iconic. He would make wide-eyed faces, shake his knees, and wear the loudest outfits imaginable. Don Knotts was a genius at physical comedy. He could make you laugh just by walking into a room. After Three's Company, he kept working, doing voiceovers for movies like Chicken Little and appearing in cameo roles. As he got into his 80s, his health started to decline. He developed lung cancer. In February of 2006, Don Knotts passed away at a hospital in Los Angeles. He was 81 years old. His old friend Andy Griffith was by his bedside not long before he passed. Don Knotts left behind a library of laughter that will last forever. Don Knotts died of natural causes after a long life. But our next story is the darkest on this list. This actor was a brilliant voice man and a sketch comedy god, but his life was taken in a violent and shocking event that shook the whole world. 14. Phil Hartman on News Radio.
Like one of those trained police attack dogs they set loose in the wild and it goes all soft and gets eaten by a deer or something.
Phil Hartman was often called the Glue. On Saturday Night Live, he was the guy who held every sketch together. He could play anyone, from Bill Clinton to Sinatra. After leaving SNL, he starred in the sitcom News Radio as Bill McNeil, an arrogant radio anchor. He was hilarious, charming, and arrogant all at once. He was also the voice of Troy McClure and Lionel Hutz on The Simpsons. Phil seemed to have it all. He had a great career, a nice house, and a family. But behind closed doors, his marriage was in deep trouble. His wife, Bryn, had serious issues with substances and mental instability. Their relationship was volatile. On the night of May 28, 1998, a terrible tragedy occurred. While Phil was sleeping in his bed, his wife took his life. It was a moment of violence that no one could comprehend. After taking Phil's life, his wife later took her own life as the police were arriving. The world woke up to the news that the funniest man in America was gone in a senseless act. He was only 49 years old. The show News Radio tried to continue, but the heart of the show was gone. It remains one of the saddest stories in Hollywood history. Phil Hartman was taken in a sudden act of violence. Our next actor was taken by a sudden medical emergency right on the set of his show. He was one of the most beloved men in the industry, and his death stopped production instantly. 15. John Ritter on 8 Simple Rules.
Honey, you're not still upset because I ruined our romantic evening, are you?
John Ritter was TV royalty. He became famous as Jack Tripper on Three's Company, falling over sofas and pretending to be someone he wasn't. He was lovable and goofy. Decades later, he made a huge comeback with the sitcom 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter. He played the dad, Paul Hennessy. It was a huge hit, and John was back on top. On September 11, 2003, John was on the set rehearsing for the show. He started to feel sick. He was sweating and had chest pains. People thought maybe it was the stomach flu or a heart attack. He was rushed to the hospital across the street. The doctors worked on him, but they misdiagnosed the problem at first. It wasn't a heart attack, it was an aortic dissection. That means the main artery in his body tore. Despite their best efforts, John Ritter passed away that night. He was 54 years old. The news was a massive shock. He had just been laughing on set hours before. The show 8 Simple Rules had to address his death. They wrote it into the show, and the episodes dealing with the father's death are some of the most real and sad hours of television ever made. John Ritter passed away while actively working on a show. Our next actor did the exact same thing, but the irony of his death is something you almost cannot believe. He was famous for faking a heart attack until the day he had a real one. 16. Red Fox on Sanford and Son.
He wouldn't put him up. If he'd have put him up, I'd have showed him my famous bolo. Wow.
I'm coming to join you, Elizabeth. That was the catchphrase of Fred Sanford on the hit 70s show, Sanford and Son. Fred was a junk dealer who was always scheming to make money. Whenever he got caught or wanted to get out of an argument, he would grab his chest, look up to the sky, and pretend to have a heart attack, calling out to his late wife. It was his signature move. Red Fox was a comedy legend who broke barriers for black comedians. Years after Sanford and Son in 1991, he was starring in a new show called The Royal Family. He was on the set, taking a break between scenes. Suddenly, he grabbed a chair and fell to the floor. People on the set actually thought he was joking. They thought he was doing his famous Fred Sanford act. They laughed at first, but it was not a joke. Red Fox was having a massive heart attack. When they realized he was not getting up, panic set in. He was rushed to the hospital, but he passed away that evening. He was 68 years old. It is a strange twist of fate that the thing he joked about for years was the thing that finally took him. Red Fox was the king of the 70s sitcom. Our next actor was the princess. She grew up on screen in one of the most iconic shows ever, but her life after the show was filled with hardship. 17. Erin Moran on Happy Days.
Hey, Blue Eyes. I'm delivering a kissogram for Joni Cunningham. Stamp it and return to sender.
If you know Happy Days, you know Joni Cunningham. She was the little sister of Richie Cunningham. We watched her grow up from a little girl with braces to a young woman. She fell in love with Chachi, played by Scott Baio. They were such a popular couple that they got their own spin-off show called Joni Loves Chachi. Erin Moran was America's sweetheart, but transitioning from child star to adult actor is very hard. After the shows ended, Erin struggled to find steady work. She had difficult times with money and eventually ended up losing her home. Reports came out that she was living in a trailer park in Indiana and struggling to get by. It was a sad situation for someone who had been so famous. In April of 2017, authorities were called to her home. Erin had passed away at the age of 56. At first, there were rumors about substance abuse because of her hard life, but the autopsy revealed the true cause. Erin had stage 4 throat cancer. She had kept her illness very private. She passed away holding the hand of her husband. It was a quiet end for a woman who had grown up in everyone's living room. Erin was the sweet sister. Our next actor was the cranky grandfather. He played one of the most iconic curmudgeons on TV, but in real life, he was a deeply spiritual and intellectual man. 18. Peter Boyle on Everybody Loves Raymond.
Hey, I love these pants. Who the hell are you to give them the goodwill?
Holy crap. That was the catchphrase of Frank Barone on the massive hit Everybody Loves Raymond. Frank was the dad who sat in the armchair with his pants unbuttoned, shouting at the TV and insulting his wife, Marie. Peter Boyle played the role perfectly. He was the ultimate grumpy old man, but Peter Boyle's career was much more than just Frank Barone. He was a movie star in the 70s. He played the monster in Young Frankenstein. He was in serious dramas, like Taxi Driver. He was actually a very gentle soul in real life. He had been a monk for a short time before becoming an actor. He was best friends with John Lennon. While he was filming the final seasons of Everybody Loves Raymond, Peter started having health issues. He had heart trouble and later developed multiple myeloma, a type of blood cancer. He kept working despite the pain. In December of 2006, just a year after the show ended its run, Peter Boyle passed away at a hospital in New York. He was 71. His co-star Ray Romano said that working with him was the highlight of his career. Peter Boyle was the loud grandpa. Our next actor was the cool best friend. She was a staple of UPN sitcoms in the 90s and 2000s, bringing a sassy energy that fans loved. 19. Yvette Wilson on Moesha.
But you know, recently, y'all, though, I had this little trouble dating, and I got hooked up with my girl.
In the 90s, the show Moesha, starring Brandy, was huge. One of the best places on the show was the Den, the hangout spot. The person running it was Andell Wilkerson, played by Yvette Wilson. Yvette was so popular as the wise-cracking big sister type friend that she took the character to the spin-off show, The Parkers. She played Andell for 5 seasons on The Parkers, owning her own restaurant and dealing with the crazy antics of Kim and Nikki Parker. Yvette was a stand-up comedian before she was an actress. She had a quick wit and a great smile, but sadly, her life was cut short. Yvette battled cervical cancer. Then her health got worse when she developed kidney disease. She needed a transplant. Her friends and fans tried to raise money for her medical bills online, but the disease was too aggressive. In June of 2012, Yvette Wilson passed away at the age of 48. It was a shock to fans who remembered her as the vibrant, full-of-life Andell. She was gone way too soon,